Well, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you to the people who have signed up for this. Just to let you know, as you can see, that we are recording this event. If you had registered and were unable to attend, we will certainly be sending you the link. There are a couple of housekeeping things that I want to go over before we hand off to our presenter today, the eminent and lovely Sarah Hager, whose picture you can see there at the top right of the screen. She's the project manager, the driving force behind the program that we're going to be examining today. A couple of things. The Q&A pod there, obviously if you have a question as we go along, you can type that in and we will answer either publicly or privately, depending upon your preference. And note, as we said, that this event is being recorded. So by joining this session, you have automatically consented to be part of the recording. And if you have now decided that that's not a good thing, then this would be a good time for you to, like Elvis, leave the building. Just to make a note that we, Wastewater Education, provide this platform for education purposes only, and any reference to any proprietary technology should not be construed as a sales pitch or an endorsement. You'll see me. I'm there pictured down at the bottom right of the screen, Dendra Best. I'm the Executive Director for Wastewater Education. And I'm going to be kind of keeping track of things behind the scenes here. If you have any technical problems, just let me know. Also, any of the images that you see on the screen, it's possible you might be watching this recording later on something that doesn't have quite so much screen real estate, a smartphone or a tablet. Any of these images, you can click on the top corner, top right corner of any of these windows, and you'll see this little image appear, and I'm just going to move it so you can see that in the recording. This is the full screen toggle switch. If you click on that, it will make the slide deck or the screen sharing, particularly when Sarah goes into the tool itself. Sometimes it can be a little hard to read some of the text on there. If you click on that, that particular image will fill your screen. To return back to this screen, go into the same general area with your mouse, click again, and you'll see those arrows are pointing inwards, and that will bring you back to this part. Also, as you're watching this recording, on the bottom, on the very bottom of your screen and on the left side of it, you'll see a progress bar and a progress thumbnail. And hopefully you can all see my cursor moving on the screen here. On the left side of the screen, every time we change to a different desktop, there's a note in there, and also you'll see the timestamp of when that happened. If there is an arrow next to it, that means more than one activity happened on that screen. If you click the downward arrow, it will show you all of the things that happened there. At any time during this recording, you can fast forward, pause, or rewind by here's the pause and play button, and the slider bar at the bottom here. Again, you can slide it forwards and backwards if you want to go back to a particular part in the recording. And it will also give you a time progress stamp here on the bottom right of your screen. By default, we set the volume to high. You can adjust that obviously with your own computer, sound system, or by that slider bar. And so, that being said, with all the housekeeping underway, I'm going to pass this on to Sarah, and I'm going to start with your slide, Sarah, and introduce yourself.
All right, good afternoon, everyone, or good morning, depending upon when you're listening to this or what time zone you're in. I'd like to welcome you to this presentation describing our project called H2O&M, which is, you can see titled the Community Septic System Owner's Guide. This presentation is nearly at the end of a 3-year grant to develop this tool, and we are really excited to be able to share this new opportunity to develop educational materials that are customized to septic system owners. Before I get into the details, I would just like to gather a little bit of information about if people have used the tool and what your backgrounds are. So some people have tried it out and want more information, and others have not. And so that's one question. And then we just like to know that the role that you're serving in the industry. So you'll see there's a range of options we'll look at, meaning are you a regulator, are you designer, are you installer, a service provider. So with that, Dendra is going to bring up a couple polls for us. All right, that's the first one, and it looks like we have a split between some regulators, a service provider, and an individual property owner. And I would say that this tool, the great thing about having a diversity of people in attendance is it really is geared towards a wide range of users, and we'll get into more of the details as we go through the presentation. So the second question again, have any of you tried using this tool already? It looks like the general answer is no, so it'll be brand new information for all of you. So with that, we'll just kind of get into the details of what, in fact, the tool itself is. Just a little bit of background about myself. I've worked at the University of Minnesota since 1999. My role is both as an engineer and an instructor. I work on a range of research-related projects, but I also do a lot of education. And all the work I do, in one way or another, has something to do with on-site wastewater treatment. So the program at the University of Minnesota has been around since the mid-1970s. Our program really started first and foremost doing training for professionals, so that was designers, inspectors, installers, service providers, and maintainers. Minnesota has a very extensive certification and licensing program. Basically anyone who touches a septic system, from the person who cleans a tank to the person who works at the local county or city, they all have to go through a certification program that ranges anywhere from a week to almost a month of training and numerous exams. That is the basis of our program that allows us to have 3 full-time professional staff people along with administrative staff to help deal with that. We also do research and demonstration, a range of, I would say, field-based for the most part, projects as well as demonstrations of newer technology. And the last two you'll see more directly relate to this project, although it was a grant-funded project, so it has a research outreach application. It really was trying to get more information into the hands of homeowners as well as small communities to look at what is needed to properly treat wastewater, but then also how to take care of those systems once they're in place. So what we're going to talk about during this project is why we did this project, what the objectives were, what is the tool that then got developed, how you all might use the tool, or how you might educate people within your jurisdictions to use the tool, and then finally the next steps and kind of our timeline moving forward. So first, Dendra said, you know, I was the project manager or the PI on this project, but I in no way did this alone. Dave Gustafson here at the University of Minnesota was part of the team. But then to really make sure that the tool had broad application, certainly across the U.S. and also potentially outside the U.S., we had a group of people from across again, the country. So you can see we had Dan Olson with the Iowa Department of Natural Resources, Nancy Deal, who's with North Carolina, Erin Wills and Sheila Craig are facilitators that actually work in Minnesota with small communities, helping them resolve their wastewater issues. Kit Farrell-Poe is at the University of Arizona, and finally Dendra, along with hosting us today, also participated in being on the project team to develop some of the content you're going to see. The last group was also very important, and that is the framework. The online portion of the tool you'll see that work was done by the Carney group. So Jules Inda and Pat Carney were the kind of spearheaders of the tool development portion. So I do want to acknowledge the funding that was received. Again, a majority of the money came into the University of Minnesota, but then we did share some of those resources out. You can see this was actually funded through the USDA NIFA project, the National Institute of Food and Agriculture, and it was great that they're funding, again, septic system related projects and seeing the value that they have across the U.S. So first, looking at why this issue is important and why we should care about managing decentralized systems. 25% of the U.S. population is on septic systems, and we actually see that this number is on the rise. You can see 1/3 of new development. According to EPA, at least 10% of systems are identified as failing each year by both state and local jurisdictions, and that state agencies report that these failing systems are the third most common source of groundwater contamination. So if you don't have a good septic system, if you're not properly taking care of it, it certainly can impact groundwater as well as surface water. For those of you, again, on the call today, feel free at any time to ask a question in the box or raise your hand, and we can also turn on your microphone if you have one. So why did we look at developing a community septic system owner's guide? Well, we all, again, I'm sure on this, who are listening now, understand that management is critical, but there are still many misconceptions about what proper management is. In addition, we see more cluster systems and advanced treatment systems going in. They're not always as simple as just having your septic tank pumped, and so therefore it's more critical that the management activities occur. The last thing is, as you'll see in this slide, I have a picture of a document we have here at the University of Minnesota called the Septic System Owner's Guide. It's very popular. It's the #1 selling publication. And it's a good document, but the downside is it's not specific. It goes over, kind of the similar components that most systems have, and then goes over, really general do's and don'ts in operation and maintenance. But to date, there's been really no systematic document that really provides for customized information. I would say here and there may be companies that have kind of developed that in-house, but we were looking, for a broad tool, again, that could work across jurisdictions to provide operation and maintenance information for homeowners. So another challenge is that our septic system industry over the last 10 or 20 years in particular has really gotten much educated at a much higher level. We have better understanding of difficult site and soil conditions and solutions to solve those. But very often this knowledge that we have with our septic system professional and regulators isn't carried through to system owners. That they still don't really understand what their septic system is and what they need to do to properly take care of it. It's kind of like a car. When we buy a car, we are given an owner's manual, and we all, for instance, know that we have to have our oil changed. That's just a given, right? But many people with their septic systems don't still even understand that they need to have their septic tank pumped, which is kind of the analogy going back to needing to have my oil changed. So you'll see the next issue I have here is that we really wanted, there are some really good operation and maintenance manuals out there for service providers. But homeowners are not service providers. They're the ultimate user of the system. So we wanted to make sure we developed something that wasn't too technical, but still gave the homeowners enough information to, one, understand what components they have, and then what really needs to be done to keep those components in good working order with the goal of protecting public health and the environment. So the next reason we decided to do this undertaking is we also wanted to raise the bar for management expectations. You can see in the picture here we have a service provider who's going to be preparing to clean off that effluent screen during a service visit. If an owner doesn't even know they have an effluent screen, that could be an item that's not may not be looked at during a service visit. I mean, again, most maintainers are going to find that and take care of it. But if they, again, know the various components they have, they can make sure those components are dealt with during service visits. So we really wanted to make sure that, again, septic system owners know what the long-term maintenance activities are, ultimately with the goals of increasing system performance and in the long term saving money. If people properly take care of their septic system, it's going to be a much more longer term solution. So as far as the whole online tool issue, why an online tool? Well, first, there just simply wasn't one. It's kind of actually surprising to me that some private company hadn't already figured this out, but that this actually has a lot of value in that you can go into this online tool and you can create an owner's guide. And we all know that everything in general is going electronic, that's the nature of the world. Another real benefit of this online tool is it allows for a national perspective on management. The tool certainly does allow for local variation because there are different local requirements, but it was also important that we start of a baseline of what is expected from a national level for management of system components. Another huge benefit of this online tool is it makes it much easier to update information in the future. Basically, when you enter information about a given site or system, that is stored in a database. So in the future, if things change, you can just go in and change that specific component that changed or user that changed, and the database is automatically then updated. The last benefit of the online tool that we have yet to realize is that as people use this tool and populate the database, we will in fact have a national clearinghouse. And all of the information that is entered will never be sold or marketed to or anything along those lines. But for instance, down the road, we may want to look at what's the average size septic tank installed in the US. And this, we would have the ability, with some additional work, to actually pull that information out, to kind of do a query of different systems across the US. So ultimately, how many people could benefit from this tool? Well, I mentioned 25% of the US population. That corresponds to roughly 70 million Americans, and certainly people in Canada and Mexico as well. But in the US, that equates to approximately 5 billion gallons per day. And that number is going to keep increasing as we keep putting more properties, new properties on septic system. In addition, we don't have great data about all of the commercial properties on septic systems. So you can see strip malls, resorts, restaurants, gas stations. I'm sure you can think of other examples. The US EPA estimates that there are over 350,000 large capacity systems, which just means they serve more than 20 people. But that is also a big estimate. So certainly those properties very often either have challenging waste streams or challenging site conditions, maybe more complicated systems, and they would certainly benefit from a customized owner's guides. So depending upon where you all live across the US, you can see there is a wide range. You know, we say 25% is the average. I was actually just in Vermont, where they mentioned they believe they're at about 55% of the properties. So you can see they're in one of those red states in the Northeast. This data is a little old. You'll see it, the last time we asked this question was on the 1990 census, but we have no reason to believe that these numbers again have gone down. The National Home Builders Association did publish, you'll see this kind of map of the U.S. in very broad sections looking at new homes built and septic systems. So here you can see that New England at 51%, that data there might support Vermont's findings. But you can see the big blocks make it a little hard to know within any given state what the percentage of septic systems is as far as those new homes being built. Another issue I brought up earlier was cluster systems. Well, why do we see more cluster systems or even alternative systems, performance-based systems? Ultimately, why we really see more cluster systems is that very often people just simply don't have the room on their property for an individual system. Another reason that's come up in some jurisdiction is total daily maximum loads. So this is a program set up by EPA and implemented on a state level where they determine how much really pollution load a given stream or lake can receive and then look to reduce that allocation. So very often, again, septic systems, which again don't directly feed into lake, rivers, and streams, can help reduce that loading. The next reason you'll see is reduced costs. When you look at hooking up a property to a wastewater treatment plant, often the cost of extending that sewer pipe can be very expensive. I mean, I've seen properties where it can be $40,000, $50,000, $60,000+ to extend sewer to a property. And when you look at a septic system that's treating the wastewater either on the property or very nearby, that collection system is minimized. Smart growth initiatives, again, this would be often developer driven or even jurisdictional driven, where they, again, like to see people not kind of the opposite of urban sprawl, where we're actually looking at having homes that are more clustered together and preserving green space. And the last thing you'll see is that sometimes there's both new development and redevelopment of existing properties that is outside the reach of municipal sewer applications. I've had some designers tell me, you know, we basically have built on all the easy properties, so now we're left with areas that are more remote, are very challenging to get sewer in, or just don't even allow for those sorts of densities. So now getting into the project in particular, you can see our first objective was to develop the content that will kind of serve as the boilerplate content for each of these owner's guides, but then this web interface, which I would say both of these components both had their own challenges. With the content, it was to make sure that we had all of our national bases covered. And then secondly, this web interface is then how do we take that information and get it into a user-friendly interface that really anyone without a lot of computer skills can use. So following that, we'll be creating expert-driven and locally customized manual. They will work for any soil-based wastewater treatment system, as well as any small-scale surface discharging systems. So there are some states in the U.S. that allow off-lot discharging septic systems that then go into a ditch, a river, a stream, maybe even possibly a lake, usually after secondary treatment followed by some sort of disinfection. So we wanted to allow that, but this isn't intended for large-scale wastewater treatment plant users. Certainly the people on those systems could use educational information as well, but currently our scope kind of doesn't go quite that far. We don't really have those treatment train components, those specific things you'd have if you were hooked up to a wastewater treatment plant in the tool. So following that, our objective will be to provide owners and users with fundamental information about the operation and maintenance of their system. Our scale for this project is anything from a single-family home, and this was something that certainly changed. When we wrote the proposal, we called it the Community Septic System Owner's Guide. And Kit Farah-Poe in Arizona said, you know, we don't have many cluster systems in Arizona. Could this work for a single-family home? And once we thought about it a little, we said, well, why not, right? So it does go from that single-family home to the largest cluster system that we've run into. So another issue we wanted to make sure was covered with our project is that it is going to create an electronic document. Ultimately, the product you'll see at the end of the tool is a PDF document. So that PDF can be printed and handed to a property owner, but it also could be emailed, it could be posted to a community website if it's for a community system. So it provides both those formats. Another thing we wanted from the very beginning is to make sure that the owner's guides could be updated if anything really changes. So that could be the system changes, a component is added, the user changes, you know, the property might change hands, or really any detail. Maybe the regulations changed and it has to be sampled on a different frequency. This would allow for that as well. So the tool that was developed is h2onm.com. If you type that address right into your server, and anyone, this is the key thing is this is a free tool. Anyone can use it. Anyone can set up an account. And I noticed a couple people were regulators, and some regulators don't really, ultimately won't be the ultimate users of this. But I think it's still really useful for you to go in and kind of see how the tool works. And you can create a project maybe for your house if you have a septic system, or you can just kind of make one up and see how the guide, what it produces when you put in information. So the tool will work for the new system that is designed or installed. So you can see this would be a tool used by installers and designers, but it also can be used for existing systems that are currently in use. And here really the audience would more likely be maintainers or service providers, possibly even homeowners. But the key thing about homeowners is you have to know some real fundamental information about your system in order to populate the tool. And we'll get into those details coming up here. So when you use the tool, when you go to h2onm.com after you set up an account, what you'll see is that you ultimately fill out a survey about the system. What that does is it takes boilerplate text and graphics that were created by the project team, but then it allows for local input of local information. So things like the number of connections, the treatment train components, any local permitting issues, the rate structure if it's hooked up to a community system. So really any regional, state, or local differences that affect the management of the system can be put into the tool as well. So our primary audience for the online tool is really septic professionals. So that includes engineers and designers, installers, operators, service providers, regulators, some community facilitators. The group I mentioned here in Minnesota really actively works with communities to help them get new systems installed. And you can see the last two I have questions on, developers or informed community members. And I have certainly met both homeowners and developers who could use this tool. But I would say with a broad brush, those two groups generally won't have the kind of content. They won't know the size of the septic tank. But again, there will be some homeowners who will. So the ultimate guide that is produced is for the individual owner of a septic system or a homeowner who is hooked up to a cluster system. So when this guide is created, the content is going to contain both the specific treatment train components. So it's going to walk through, you have a septic tank. That septic tank goes to a pump tank that goes to a mound. And it's going to describe how each of those components work, both with text and diagrams/pictures. Some people are going to read the text, some people are going to look at pictures, but we did want to give them a little information. To me, if you understand what a septic tank is and what its purpose is, I think then you're more likely to understand why maintenance is so important. So then for each of those treatment train components, it's going to lay out which maintenance, operation and maintenance is required both by the owner and the professional. And you might say, well, what does the owner have to do with, for instance, maintaining their septic tank? Well, it's not really the maintenance, it's the operation. I mean, ultimately, homeowners are the operators of their system. If, for instance, they decide that they're going to flush all their kitty litter into their septic tank, they're really going to affect the operation of that system. So that's why the owner is always part of it. Again, they're not going to be the person who's going to clean out that tank. That's going to be a professional activity. But we think both of those components are important. So along with the specific treatment train components, there's going to be a section that goes through kind of general management issues and challenges, kind of a room-by-room discussion of good practices when you're on a septic system. And finally, and maybe the most used section of every homeowner's guide I have, is the troubleshooting guide. So this will go over, for instance, your alarm's going off, what should you do? Or you're smelling septic odors. I understand that not every homeowner, when they get this, is going to read it, from start to finish, but I do think they'll have it as a resource moving forward. So where the content is going to come from, each of these guides is going to be a combination of that boilerplate content along with the locally customized content. What if the user of the tool doesn't know some key information? So for instance, I mentioned the size of the septic tank. If the person using the tool doesn't know the size of the septic tank, they can leave that field blank. It's just the guide will end up being more generic. And ultimately, getting a copy of your design or your as-built or information from the designer or the county is what's going to help you, if you're not the person who has that information, develop the best guide for your system. Here's an example, and you'll see this is actually the system. We're going to go through an example of designing an owner's guide here towards the end of the presentation, and it's for a university property that was installed last year. And so this is what the front cover of a completed guide looks like. So you can see the first image you see is who developed it, so that's the program I work in, the name of the project, and then a picture that shows, again, something that helps that owner identify, oh, this owner's guide is for me. It's not just some generic information. So how it works is, again, a septic system professional or a homeowner creates an account, but the overall idea is that a professional will have an account where multiple projects are stored. So they can have hundreds. We have no limit on how many projects an individual can have. Then after they have that, they're going to use the web interface where they will enter specific site and system information, and then the tool creates an electronic or hard copy O&M manual, which contains stock images and text, or it could be customized information. So going back to my septic tank example, we have a stock image of a septic tank. If instead, though, the user of the tool has a diagram of what the septic tank looks like on that property, they can replace our stock image with the customized local information. And I think the more of that the user of the tool does, the better the guide's going to be. So this shows the website. If you go there right now, h2onm.com, this is kind of the welcome screen you'll see to kind of start off. And you'll see it has, are you a new user? So for all of those of you who haven't been to the tool before, you would want to click on that register now under new users. It's also in the right corner. It also says register. As an existing user, you can see I would just click on login here. Sorry about that. You would just click login here, and it would give you that opportunity to register for the first time. So here again is the registration screen, and I am not going to do this. I think I've created my 3 accounts for myself so far. But this is the screen you would all see if the first time you go to the website. And I mentioned it's free. There's no harm in establishing an account, even if you don't plan on using it a whole lot. One thing I do want to point out, and some of this might be a little hard to see on your slides where this little star or asterisk is, but there are places within the tool that you have to enter information. So here again, you'll see that basically your name, your phone number, your address, your email are all things you have to enter. I can guarantee you we will not be sending you anything in the mail, and we will also not be frequently emailing you. The only time we would email users of the tool is if we have a big update that happened. For instance, we added a new section, or we added, one of our suggestions from one of these is we should have a library of images. So if we create a new resource, we may just kind of let people know, but I see that being something that occurs really infrequently. But your email address is how you log into the tool in the future, so that's again why that's needed. At the bottom of this, you also create a password that you're going to use when you log back into the tool each time. After you do complete your registration, you're going to get an email. So you can see the email comes from Community Septic System website. I get mine immediately, meaning it takes a matter of minutes before it shows up in my inbox. I would say that you might want to wait, though. I mean, between servers and all those things, it may take I'd say half a day. If you don't have it by the following day, I would check your spam, wherever your, kind of things like that go, your email may not have recognized this address and may have discarded it for you. So if that occurs, and you don't get it, you can contact us and let us know, but it automatically generates this, so it got sent to you, but it might be lost somewhere in the universe. So again, then after you get that, it actually just asks you to confirm your account, and then after you confirm your account, every time you go to the tool, you'll see this sign-in screen. So on the sign-in screen again, you put in your email and password, you click sign in, and you are good to go. So this is again me signing in, so you can see this is again one of my accounts that I have, and what you'll see is that everywhere that I kind of have this arrow, I'll talk a little bit about, and then after this we'll actually go into the tool itself. But you see it welcomes me. Welcome Sarah Hager of the University of Minnesota. So I entered that as my company. At any time you can edit your profile, so that would be changing information about myself. The next thing down you'll see is that I can create a new project. So that would be, I'm starting one from scratch. I can manage my image library, which we'll get into here in a minute. But the other thing I really wanted to point out is locating the existing project. So this would be if you either know, did I have a project like this? Or if you're wondering if an owner's guide was already developed for a project, you can search for one based in that box. So that will bring up not just ones you created, but did somebody else develop a guide? You can't get the guide, but it'll give you the contact information for the person who created it, which will then allow you to very likely get a copy of that. It kind of depends who you are and why you want it. I'm sure if they'll share it with you. But we really created that so we wouldn't have duplicate guides being made for the same property. So I think with that, Dendra, we'll actually switch over to sharing my screen so I can show people, in fact, how to use the tool. And that is the key thing about the tool, is that it really is easy to use. That being said, I just have to hit share here. That being said, the first time you use any tool, it can be challenging. So there is a little bit of a learning curve, and that's why I really wanted to show you some of this so you could see how it really works in the tool. So here I am signing into the tool. I'm using a Gmail account here. When I'm in as the university, under my university email, I have some administrative rights, and I just didn't want to confuse the issue here. So again, it's welcoming me, Sarah Hager, and you can see I can, just like I was showing before, I can go in and edit my system profile, I can create a new project, or manage my image library. So with that, the first thing I would do if I were new to this tool is I would go under this tab at the top that says Help. So these are kind of what I would call frequently asked questions or challenges you may run into. So there's a section before you start that would be good to read. One of the bigger questions or issues that comes up is about images. So I mentioned you have the ability to customize owner's guides to upload pictures, and that's what you'll see. The file formats that are allowed are JPEGs, PNG files, and GIF files, and that they are limited to 2 megabytes in size. Some people's smart phones, cameras, take pictures that are bigger than 2 megabytes. So we do have some resources if you, for instance, need to and don't know how to resize your images, but most of our computers have software on them right now that can help us get those under 2 megabytes. Your ultimate size of any owner's guide is not, there is no maximum size. You can have you could have 20 pictures in one of them. But we just kept it to 2 megabytes per picture just to make sure we kind of stay in a reasonable realm. So you can see there's navigation tips, information about privacy, how to search for a project, tips on creating a template. So this is another really good section in that if you, for instance, have systems that you regularly design, install, or service, and that's what I find is that many people do. They, for instance, have, probably 4 or 5 systems that they regularly work with. You can create a template. So, for instance, you'll see here I have a Mound template So anytime I want to design a mound, I'll start with that because it already has my uploaded images of what a mound looks like in my jurisdiction, typical tank sizing and tank configurations. So the first one of those might take you, 20 minutes to set up or 30 minutes. And I really find that getting all my information together is what takes me the most time. Actually, using the tool is kind of the easy part. But if I use that template, then I go back and I've already created that. All then I need to enter is the really specific information that's unique to that site. And when I do that, it might only take me 5 or 10 minutes. So that's kind of the overview of the help and the images. So I'm going to go back to my home. So another really nice, useful thing that was added was I'm going to go to my image library. So this image library is a place where you would add images that you plan on using in multiple guides. Another great reason why you might have an image library is if it's slow, if uploading images from your computer based on your internet speed is slow, this is something you can do at night, right? You can just say, I want to upload these images. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to go here into a folder and just show you how easy, again, it is. Assuming I can find my folder in my mess of a computer, right? So here's my training. I have some files here. And so again, what you would want to do is pick images you plan to use. So let's say, again, in my jurisdiction, I have this septic tank that's 1,500 gallons that I use a lot. And let's say I also want to upload this grease trap. I can select as many as I want. Let's say while I'm at it, I'm going to select this 5,000 gallon tank and this alarm, because I use the same alarm over and over again. So my alarm file was too big, so I would have to actually go back in and change that to be less than that 2 megabytes. So for now, we're just going to leave that one. But you can see my 3 tanks, and these might be the 3 tanks I use all the time, are going to now be in my image library. So with that, I'm going to go back to my account and my projects. These are, again, diagrams of tanks, but you could also have a picture, an actual photograph of a system as well. So you can see on this screen are my projects. So, the one thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to increase, I'm going to see what happens. There we go. That might make it bigger on all of your screens. These are the current 3 projects I have, but this ultimately, if you think about someone who's using this could have 100 projects listed. So you can see I have 2 templates I've created. So these would be systems I see using all the time, a mound template, a peat filter template. This University of Minnesota Bee Center is actually a mound. So when I developed that one, I actually used my mound template as my starting spot. So you can see from this page of my projects, I could start a new project. I could actually update the content of any of these templates, or sorry, any of these projects. This is kind of, and I'll click on one of these just to show you, this is kind of the very general information. So here's the current image of the project logo. The next thing is the image of the property. So let's say when I put this in, I didn't know the address of the property and I left it blank, but now I know it's at 75 Arboretum Boulevard. So I could update that. I would go to the bottom and I would say save project details. And so then it will update that automatically, and if I go to create a PDF of that, you'll see the one over here, download PDF, that would be updated in the actual guide. So the next thing you'll see is add PDF content. So you would click on this when you're going to actually, so I already have these projects created. I'll show you a new one here in a minute. But this would be if you, let's say when you created this, you didn't have a picture of the mound system completed. I could later go back in and add that. The other thing you can see that I can do from this site is I can also delete projects. So if people make projects that they, again, kind of did as a test run or don't ever see using, they can actually go back in and later delete that. So I think with that, though, we'll actually just start a new project. So the new project, again, that we're going to create is for that University of Minnesota Hubachek lodge that I was talking about. So here since I've done it before, it kind of populates it for me. And it asks me, do I want to use the default content, which is what's just what's in the tool to start with, or do I want to use one of my past projects? For this one, because I know it's a mound, there's a bunch of other stuff before the mound, I'll actually start with the mound template. So then I can choose the logo for this project. So choosing the logo, again, since I'm developing it here at the university, I'm going to use my university logo. The next thing it wants to do is have a picture. This is the picture that's going to go on the cover. So I picked that one that says Hubachek Wilderness Center. So then I just need to enter really basic information. Where is the system located? What's the address? So it is at 425 Shady Lane. It's in Ely. If you haven't been to Ely, it's a beautiful place. So that's in Minnesota. And the zip code there is 55796. So here's a spot where you again, I forgot the country, so I'm just going to move that down there. So the country is the US. You could put USA. You could spell out United States. So then kind of moving down this list, you'll see that that's where my stars stopped. So if you have a project where you know your parcel ID, if they have a website, and actually this university property does have a website, so I'm going to put that in. I don't know the longitude and latitude, so I can leave those blank. And it also asks me, is there an easement? So that would be for access to performing service or inspections on the system, and this project does not. So then it wants to know who's the primary contact. So this would be either who very likely developed this, or it could be who's managing it. So it kind of depends on the site or the system. So usually it's going to be who's developing this guide. So then it again wants to know that person's phone number, my phone number here. What's my email? There's my email at the university, my address. It's in St. Paul, and there's my zip code. And now I have created my project. And you know how quickly, so you can see my computer's thinking a little bit, how long that's going to take depends upon on your speed of your connection. So remember how I had made a template? So this template was for a single family home, but this isn't a single family home, so I'm going to need to change a couple things. So you can see it wants to know how many properties or structures are connected, and at this lodge there's actually 6 different buildings that are hooked up to the system. There again actually are no plans to hook up any further buildings. It wants to know what's the design flow, and I do know the design flow for this system. So the design flow is 2,500 gallons per day. And another thing to note is underneath this there's a little hint that says enter the design flow either in gallons or liters per day. So initially we only had that you could put in gallons, and some of our Canadian friends said we'd like to use this tool too, but we use liters and we have provinces. So we've made some allowances to allow for this to be used in places outside the US. So the next question is the population. If you know how many people kind of at peak capacity could use this system, you can enter it. So if you had a household, it might be that there's 4 people living here. For this system, again, you know, at peak capacity, we're really looking at that 50 people could be staying at this lodge. We know when this system was built, so we would it was constructed in 2014. There have been no repairs made to the system. So the next section you'll see I click on what is their source of drinking water. So you can see I have options. Do they have a water main or a branch water line location? You could enter that. Do they have a domestic service water? So again, this system is actually fed by a public well. So it says, again, enter its location in relation to the septic system in sentence form. So I would write the closest well, because there's actually multiple on this property, is greater than 50 feet from the mound system, which is our required setback in Minnesota. And I know that number can vary. It's in the well house, so they actually have a well house on this property. All right, so the next thing it's going to, so then you can click save, or it'll automatically be saved into the database, but if you're ever wondering, you can click on that little save button. So the next question is, who regulates this? So is a state permit, a county, a local permit? And actually this system has a permit from the university, so we are viewed to be kind of our own municipality. So I actually have to again write this in sentence form. So, oops, the permitting so it's our building code. My typing instructor could see me now, right? So the last section that kind of is this overview information is, again, there's a section that's additional assistance and contact. So you can see key people and contact information. So I'm the person, so you can see the University of Minnesota and EPA are the only ones who are actually filled out on this list. So I have the option, this button on the left would allow me to edit it, and the one on the right would allow me to delete it. So for instance, I don't need to add myself because in this example I'm already on the list, so I would click delete and say, are you sure you want to delete this? And I say yes, and it goes away. If I left that there, it would be in their owner's guide as yourself ? So the next one going down is regulations and information. So if I want to update that, you can see I click on it and then I enter who that is. So actually the person at the university who does this in the building code division, his name is Clayton Talbot. Clayton's phone number is 612-626-2783. The website, again, the building code division does have a website, and that's where they actually list all their kind of requirements and policies. So, you know, this otherwise might be the county where the system is located, their website. And lastly, is there an email? And you can leave any of these blank if you don't have a website or whatever it might be. You can leave those blank. And I click save, and it gets updated. So I could go through all of these. So we could add the designer, we could add the installer, all of those. Or you may say, well, we didn't have an inspector on this, so I could delete it. The key thing is you just want to make sure you fill out each of these. So if you don't, they'll be blank in the guide that's created. So that's the organization of the system. So the next section we would go through is general information about the system itself. So we can upload a diagram of the system. We, again, have a very generic diagram of the system. So ideally, this is one of the key, I think, images you'd want to customize. So again, I'm going to go into my folder that I created for this project, and I have a diagram of the system that I then can upload. So this would, again, and then I would put a caption on it. So this would be the lodge septic system location. And you can be as specific or generic as you want. So you have the option as well to do a kind of a broader scale image that would show where it is relation to the community. And I also can upload another image. So let's say I wanted to show just a picture of, for instance, what the lodge looks like. So I have this really pretty picture that shows the lodge from across the lake. And, you know, just to customize it, again, I'd like to do that. So I would title this one, View of the Lodge from Across, the lake. And I can hit save. So again, where are my wastewater sources? Is it residential? Is there an in-home business, or is it commercial or non-residential? And again, this does have some residential water, but it also coming from structures, but it also has a commercial system. So again, I need to enter in sentence form what is the commercial. So the lodge has a commercial kitchen. So the last section of this portion is, are there any setbacks? So this is the giant list of setbacks you might have, and this is another, I think, really good reason to create a template. So I live in Minnesota. I'm about as far from the ocean as you can get. I don't think I'm ever going to make an owner's guide that has a setback to the ocean. So for my templates, I probably want to go in and delete all the ocean lines. You know, for this property, again, I have a setback from the lake. So the setback from this, again, is 75 feet from the lake that this system is on. So you can see it then updated, and what will be in the guide will be 75 feet. So it's up to you. This could be what's the required setback. It also could be how far is it from the property line. That's kind of a different perspective. So I'm putting in what the minimum setback is. It has to be at least 10 feet from the property line. There's no swimming pool. So you could go through all of these. Again, we have a setback to our well, right? We said that was 50 feet. And here's one example, and I just did it myself, where I put feet, FT here, and FE, ET here. So, and that's just a little probably pet peeve thing. I would want those to all be the same, and either one of those is fine, right? But just having it be consistent. So, so you could go in and do as many of these, but it's the same thing as we talked about with contacts. If you don't update them or delete them, they'll go in there empty. And you know, that's probably not the end of the world, because if there's not a number there, it's probably not relevant to your property. So that kind of goes over the wastewater treatment system kind of overview. There's a section for expenses that goes over, again, how much did the system initially cost, what is the replacement expenses, what are the operation expenses. So with some systems, you may choose to not enter any of this information. So if you don't know it, and it may not be relevant. This section to me is really built particularly for community systems where people need to understand what's the upfront cost, what's the long-term cost, but I even think this is useful to individual homeowners as well. So you can see, looking at the left here, I just click on each of these and it continues to walk through. Now we're going to kind of start with the treatment train. So does the effluent in the house, is it gravity? And again, so is the effluent flowing by gravity of the house? Do they have a pump that's pumping wastewater from inside the house? And you can see these next ones aren't very common. Do they have an alternative toilet, a gray water system, a grease interceptor? That's kind of the first section here. It then goes over, do they have any non-sewage dischargers like a water softener, pools, you know, filters, things like that? How do we access? And this is something you'll see in every section moving forward. There's like, where do you access this component, which is important for maintenance, and then what is the critical operation and maintenance. But to kind of keep us moving here, I'm going to move into collection. So now we're moving outside the home, and we want to look at how does the wastewater get from the building or home to the first component, which is usually our septic tank. So on this property, we actually have several of the buildings flowing by gravity, but then, and when you see I click that, this image shows up, and I can leave the image that's there, or I can upload my own. The second thing is one of the buildings, actually right outside it, has a pressure/grinder pump that's grinding into the system. So, and there's an image there as well. And I'll go through coming up here how you could customize that image. But for these, I'm just going to leave. And you can see I have where is the access, where is it located, and what's the operation and maintenance. So the next question is, what tanks are on this property? So, and some properties, you might only have one of these tanks. But on this property, for instance, because of that commercial kitchen, I actually have a grease interceptor, I have septic tanks, and do you see what's happening when I click on each of these? Under tanks to the left, a little tab is being added. It actually has a pump tank. It has a flow equalization tank to spread out the water. So this is, again, compared to many of the systems you all might deal with, a pretty complicated system. So then for each of these, I actually then go in and I specify specific information about that tank. So we're again going to do the grease interceptor. So again, I'm actually going to upload it, and I could have done it in two directions because I actually picked this time to just go to my desktop, but I could have gone to my image library because I earlier uploaded this grease tank diagram. And so then I would write that this is the Weezer 1500 gallon tank. So where is it located? It's on the property. I could upload an image showing where that is. So if you have an image of these things, that's great. If you don't, you know, again, you don't have to do that. So I'm looking through here. Do I have an image? This is actually showing my gravity flow. So again, here choosing my image. And I can put a caption on that. So this would be a picture. The other one was a diagram, right? I didn't specify that. Picture of the tank. What's the tank made of? It's made of concrete. It's 1,500 gallons. It meets local codes. It was a brand new tank, right? The access is above grade. I can, again, the type of it, again, it's a manhole. Oops. Where is it located? It's the center of the tank. I can upload an image of that and put a caption on it. But the other thing I really wanted to show you is this operation and maintenance table. So here now, again, is the table that's going to say what needs to happen with this grease interceptor. So you can see I'm going to check the structural condition, the operating levels, I'm going to clean it. And so, again, you'll see that, for instance, this says it should be pumped when it's greater than 50%. Well, let's say I didn't like that, right? That I wanted it that based on my local regulations, it would be required to be pumped when it's at 40%. So I could go in and change the 50 to 40 and click Save, and that will be updated in the diagram. So another thing that I can do in this, and I'm going to go to the top here to show you, it says if I click on this box, I can hide selected activities. So for instance, this grease interceptor doesn't have an alarm on it because it's hooked up to other tanks. So this has alarm things on it. Well, I don't have an alarm, so I'm going to click those away. I'm going to click that button, and now they're not going to be in my table. So another thing you might want to change, and we generically use the word service provider to describe anyone who might do maintenance. Some people won't know who a service provider is. So again, I could actually change that information in here, and I could change that. In many jurisdictions, they're called pumpers, right? So I click Save, and now, again, that language is changed in my table. So you would go through the same process for all of your tanks. I'm going to move to the next section, which is the advanced treatment section that goes over, do you have something besides a septic tank before the soil? So this site, again, has an aerobic treatment unit. So you can see when I clicked on that, this little box came up over here. So then I would go into the aerobic treatment unit section, and this is, again, another spot where uploading a specific diagram or picture of the brand ATU that was installed makes sense. So for our site, again, this is a nibbler system that was installed for the kitchen waste. So I'm going to upload a diagram of that nibbler. So you could use ATU, or you could write out aerobic treatment unit. That's up to you. So again, you could then write in specific information about the brand. So, you know, the nibbler system is designed to handle a wastewater. And it like, so that's a debate, right? Do you spell wastewater one word or two word, right? You could leave it either way. It just, again, is giving you little typo corrections. You can choose to use them or not, right, from the kitchen. But you could enter as much as you want there. So again, where is that located? So again, I can click on an image. Ooh, I click save. So I'm going to upload from my device. And so this would be a very site-specific information. So it's probably, again, not something you're going to have in your image library. So this is the nibbler tank going in. And that is the hard part about during installation. You often don't kind of have the final version. But so again, you could write nibbler tank during installation. Where is the access? Again, I might want to. Again, I actually have a hatch on this, and I have a picture of that hatch access. So again, it's located at the end of the tank. It's a hatch. It's above grade. I have an image, right? Hatch on nibbler system. Is there an alarm? Yes. I can upload an image of the alarm. I can't do this one because remember how my alarm was too big. So I have one. We'll see if this one's small enough. It just kind of shows it at install. Oh, this one was under 2. So here again, so it's located, alarm location by the nibbler. So if you had more than one aerobic unit, you could enter that. The last thing, again, you do is you go through the operation maintenance table for the nibbler. We have a 6-month interval. And for this property, it's actually right. It's not used during the winter. But I know some commercial nibbler units that need to be maintained every 3 months. So I could go in and change some of these. I could enter specific manufacturer requirements. So again, I could add them down here below if there's something that wasn't covered in our table. So kind of the last treatment train component is where does it go after the septic tank or the advanced treatment unit. So again, on this site, it's actually going to a mound system. So then I can go in and enter the mound information. So we have one mound system, and the mound system, again, you can upload an image. You can specify where it's located. So looking at this again here, here's a diagram of specifically of the mound. So it again is upslope of the tanks. It's located on the property. And I just want to note, every time you enter this information, you don't have to hit the save button. It's automatically saving when you move on to basically the next component. So the next thing it asks us, and you can leave this blank if you don't know the exact size of the system, you can leave this section blank, but I do know that this is 40 feet by 200. It's a big mound by 200 feet long. It has rock as its distribution media. It uses pressure distribution. It's an above grade system. And this system, again, was actually a replacement system. There's no identified new replacement area, but if you had one, that would be a good thing to lay out. Again, what is the access? So our access is cleanouts on the laterals. They are above grade. I can upload an image. So then again, the question is, do I actually have a diagram of one of those? And again, I actually do have some clean out diagrams. So I will upload that image. It actually shows it, and it's probably hard to see from your viewpoint during when we were doing squirt height testing. So then do I want to upload my own version of what my mound system looks like? So again, if you have a more specific mound cross-section or image you want to upload, you can replace the image again we had. So I would say mound, side, and cross-section. And then I can add more mounds. So the last thing, just like with all of them, is what's the operation and maintenance required with the mound system itself. So that kind of goes over just an example of what that treatment train can look like. The last 3 sections, which we'll go over really quickly, is kind of the general maintenance section. So for instance, I mentioned this property is seasonal. So I could write the system is and started back up in the spring. Are there any special uses? This could be some sort of commercial use or in-home businesses. And this last section is, I think, particularly pertains to systems that that are existing that you may know are not quite at where we build them today. They may have too small a tank. They should really add in an effluent screen. So these are just optional things you could add if you wanted to, things that would increase longevity. So the next section, oh, I skipped problems and troubleshooting. We want to go back to there before we go to general use and operation. So this is, again, a section that's going to kind of go room by room that has really kind of general information. But we ask a couple questions here. Do they have electricity? Are there permitting requirements, such as if they're going to add to the home or an in-home business? Are there property transfer requirements? So again, on this property, again, the system, and the university isn't probably going to sell this anytime soon, right? Has to be inspected prior to selling of the property. But the university does have their, if they're going to buy a property, they also want an inspection so they know what they're getting themselves into. Is there anything else you want to add into operation and maintenance that wasn't otherwise covered? And lastly, again, is that general use and operation. So, oh, I just did that. I skipped it again. I apologize. I'm going back to problems and troubleshooting after I skipped it twice. So this is a section you're really always going to want to visit as well. I guess the downside is you could put some things into the guide that may not be applicable to where you live. So I, for instance, thought about this forest fire one, which actually is relevant. So this lodge is in a very heavily wooded area, and they actually have fire suppression built in. So I would want to leave that line in. You can see it's covered by floodwater, questions about odors, freezing, burrowing, all of those things. And so for me, actually, all of these apply to this property. But let's say again that we have a system that's in a very warm climate where it doesn't freeze. They wouldn't want to leave this one in about freezing. Or if it's not in a forested area, you could delete those. The downside is if you leave one of them in and it's not relevant, that's okay. The other thing is you can't, these lines are too long, but if you want to see, so if they find sewage surfacing in their yard, we can look at what that says. So you can see the risk that shows up in the table is that there's the human contact with sewage is a serious public health risk, many waterborne illnesses, and then it talks about causes and remedies. So you can edit all of these if you want to. So you can see kind of the detail behind all of these. Or the first time you print one or look at one, you can see what the content is, and you can choose to edit any of them that you see fit. So that's kind of all of the sections, kind of an overview. The last thing you do when you're all done is you click on this button that says Make PDF. And when you do that, you're going to get a completed guide. And that completed guide, so we didn't fill out every section, so the guide content is as good as what you put into it. So if you end up skipping sections, not answering information, it just isn't going to populate that guide. So here again, so I shouldn't have skipped over that so quick, right? Here's my nice cover, the University of Minnesota Hubbacheck Lodge system, right? A little disclaimer, who developed the guide and how to contact me if you want more information. General information about where the system is, and then it really gets into it kind of starts with some basics about what a septic system is. It does that for a few pages, and then it gets into their system. So what their system was designed for, when it was built, and goes through all those details. So I think with that, Dendra, we'll go back to my presentation. This is a good time if you have also any questions about the tool or the guides. I do see the 2 questions from Karen, and I don't know, I mean, certainly at this time it isn't in Spanish. That could certainly be a 2.0 version. I do expect that we will enhance this in the future as time and money allows. It's good to always get through all the way through this project before we look for more resources. And the biggest reason is we wanted to identify all of the potential areas we might want to make improvements. So I would expect that that's something, again, the official end of this grant is at the end of July, so that we'll be looking for more funding soon after that. And I certainly are going to go back to the people who funded it, but we'll also look outside of our initial funding source for additional resources. So I'm just going to go through a few of these slides. I'm going to skip over things we covered during my presentation. We're always prepared just in case we don't have good internet connection. I will just go back to this to highlight. When you get done with one of these is when I created the PDF, but you'll see that down here where it says download PDF, you can go there at any time and actually download it. So Karen, your next question, how about tracking repairs? Tracking would shortcut failures, also would help with running tables of how many inlet tees were replaced. My answer to that is there is a section where repairs can be entered. So that is really the place. If you remember towards the beginning of the guide, you entered those, and you actually put a date of when repairs were made to the system. But it really currently, I would say, doesn't allow for you to get into excruciating detail, but you could add, again, that a T was replaced. As far as date stamping comments, as Dendra suggested, when you enter any information, you can certainly put a very specific date that something was entered in. So it does allow for that. So I talked about the PDFing. Let's see. So we talked about the template or new project. So this kind of is just the sections of the tool or guide is the information that we kind of went through. So the organization, is it residential, the cost, the plumbing, the collection. Then you go through the tanks, the advanced treatment, and the rest of those sections. So this, again, just shows an overview of the sections of the tool. Just remember, when you select the different components that are in there, they're going to show up there on the left so you can enter information about those. Here's another completed guide for a development here in Minnesota called South Shores Development. So again, this is a community system, kind of a picture of their community center on the front cover of the guide. So at the end of the day, what I want to leave you with, why you might consider either using this tool or recommending this tool. To me, one of the greatest advantages is its value-added information to the customer. That people are often buying septic systems that cost $5,000 to $30,000, and ultimately very often not given information about how to take care of their septic system. And I think that's negligent. I think we need to, as an industry, take every opportunity we can to provide educational materials. Another advantage, again, this isn't one company, one designer, one installer. This is professional third-party recommendations, both about O&M activities and then activities within the household. Another great advantage of this tool is the ability to update the manuals as the system or user changes. And really for the industry, this capacity to create templates for commonly designed, installed, or service systems, I think is going to be a great tool moving forward. So another example I have here is that could work for community systems. You have 4 homes, 1 business, 20 people per day, 2,500 gallons. So you can see in this case they have 2 septic tanks, a pump tank, a single pass sand filter that goes to pressurized trenches, or an LPP system depending upon where you live. So again, going through the tool, I would enter the number of properties, the flow, the number of people hooked up to the system. I would select again that they have a septic tank and a pump tank on the system. I would then fill out those sections, and here again I'm taking my stock septic tank and replacing it with the customized septic tank on this property. Going through again that I can uncheck these to delete them, or I can edit different aspects of the operation and maintenance table. Here's another example of something you might want to change. This is a system that has an effluent screen. We have that the default cleaner of the effluent screen is a service provider. I do know that there are some homeowners that clean their effluent screen themselves, so you could choose to change that from service provider to owner if that was relevant for a given property. So here again we have a sand filter. It's a very generic sand filter image. You could upload and customize your own. Then the last thing is our low pressure pipe system. I would enter how many of those do I have, where is it located, specific pictures or diagrams for the site. Maintenance again, when we went through the maintenance section, one of the ones was, does this have a service contract? And this system again does have a maintenance contract exists with R&R service. So that's another really important thing to note. You can see the special use we added is a daycare is part of this system. So the last section before we get to general use, edit and deleting, on my troubleshooting guide I would go through. So here under general use, contact Stearns County for any change of use that could impact the quality or quantity of water. You can see change of ownership. The system must be in compliance for any of the homes to sell. That could be the specific local requirement. And I would be done. So kind of wrapping up our presentation today, and then we'll see if there are questions. Our next steps are certainly for people to use the tool. We do expect that there will be kind of small adjustments being made over time. We think we have it where it needs to be certainly to be usable and practical, but if we have suggestions that are easy to change, we still have time on the grant to make those small adjustments. Over the next several months, as we're wrapping up the project, we will be posting some example completed guides to our website at the university. So this is not the same website as the tool, that's the h2onm.com, but at septic.umn.edu, under professionals, under our forms and worksheets, we're going to create a section where we post example completed guides. And those will actually be guides for real projects and real communities. So I would say look back for those. I think they'll kind of serve as a good reference moving forward. So these are the 2 websites. The website at the top of the page is our regular University of Minnesota workshop. That's the septic.umn.edu. And then the bottom right, again, is the h2onm.com. And my email address is listed as well. So if you have questions or comments, 2 days from now, 2 years from now, feel free to contact me as well. The last thing I would note to the 4 of you on the call today, but all of you who listen to this later, is that we are looking to get the word out about this tool in any way, shape, or form. So if this is something you can promote at your local conference, in your local newsletter, please, I'm happy to provide information. I'm happy to do webinars in the future, even speak at conferences possibly about it. So if there's any way to get this tool into the hands of the industry, that is certainly our goal. the last thing we would like to do is to make this great tool and nobody use it, which I'm not worried about, but I really would like a lot of people to use it. I think it really has a great opportunity to provide really, really good information to homeowners. So I think with that, we'll see if anyone else on the call has questions. I also know Dendra has a poll here to ask us as well. And as I mentioned before, if any of you have microphones, you can feel free to ask the question, but you can also type it into the box. So.
Oh, excuse me. I put the wrong screen up. There you go. And
so you'll see a poll. Oh, sorry. The poll is up, but you'll also see if you have suggestions or comments. And Karen, we've already gotten several of yours recorded, but if you have any other, feel free as well to put those in that other box as well.
Okay, let's end the poll. And let's go to our closing screen here. Okay, while we're thinking if there are other questions that I've reopened a public chat window here too, which you can use, or the private Q&A pod. A couple of points. One of the hints that for those of you who are going to be taking pictures of any of the systems, and if they are too large to upload, a real quick helpful hint is to email that picture from your phone to yourself, because when you do, it will give you the choice to send it in a slightly smaller or a much smaller or a thumbnail version. So that's one quick way to render your full resolution images down to a size that fits into the tool. Couple of pointers while we're waiting for any of the questions to come in. Although a lot of the individual owners may not have all the information that they need to enter into this, one of the things that all the partners on the project have done is work with groups of homeowners or community systems to do evaluation projects. And one of the things that struck us when we were doing this was it was a great opportunity to have some really important conversations with either the community leader of this project or the individual owners, because, for example, one project that we worked on, the access to the treatment component was wholly contained on the property of the middle homeowner, and there was no deed of covenant for access to this system. And although they had all signed on to be part of this community system, there was no obligation if the middle homeowner sold or died and left this to somebody else to keep that access. So that was something that they were able to see was really important and to go back and write into their management documents. Another issue were easements in general. The suggestion, we knew they had a shared holding area and a pump tank, but there were no alarms in the pump tank. And yes, they thought it probably would be a real good idea the next time they have that service to have an alarm installed. So although the information, this isn't designed to be the be-all and the end-all, as Sarah said, this document can be constantly updated, can be constantly amended or used as a template for other people within this particular system. So it's a great opportunity to open up a real serious conversation about ownership and management, both of your individual property, but your rights as an individual within that community system. So I don't see any other questions. Sarah, do you have any other comments that you'd like to make before we close out today?
Yeah, I think I just would like to respond to Karen's last question or comment. She said she's trying to get her head around how to use this when I'm implementing a wastewater management program for a community. It probably depends a little on what that community looks like, because ultimately you can see that each of the guides created is customized to the specific system that that owner is hooked up to. So it would take that kind of work to create a guide that is, you're hooked up to a trench, you're hooked up to a mound, whatever the range of system is, or you're hooked up to this cluster. So ultimately, and you could make one that's very generic, but I don't know how useful that would be. I haven't had someone, really go that route, because this was really meant to be customized information. So I think just playing around with the tool some and seeing what your options and where there is flexibility will be a good place to start.
Okay, not seeing any other questions or comments. Again, do feel free to contact Sarah or any of the other partners that were involved. One final point, if you are watching this recording because several states have agreed to assign continuing education credit or continuing septic education credit for watching this presentation, there is an additional requirement, and if you signed up to do this you will have been notified, but just a reminder that one of the requirements is that you do have to sign in, create an account, and play around and email back at least a section of the PDF that you create, so that we have an assurance that you have actually used this to create an educational document. Does not have to be for a real community. Obviously, it had much better value if it was, and that you are a service provider that manages and routinely does maintenance on a community system. It will have much greater value for you and that community, but if necessary, it can be a sample of the kind of information that you would find of value to have in an eventual community septic system owner's guide. So with that, ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to end the recording. Do feel free to contact us. And as Sarah said, if you would like to have a presentation specifically for your area, do let us know. And with that, I'm going to stop the recording for today. And thank you. We'll stay on the line for a little bit in case there are other questions. Otherwise, we wish you the very best of the rest of your day.